Picture this. It's a bitter February night in 1352 AD, and you're lying in a stone cottage in rural France. Your husband sleeps beside you, his breathing steady but not quite deep enough to mask your movements. 3 feet away, your mother-in-law shifts on her straw mattress, her sharp ears attuned to every sound. Your 2 young children share a bed against the far wall, and your husband's teenage brother occupies the space near the door. The dying embers in the hearth cast dancing shadows that could expose any sudden movement. Yet somehow, in this cramped space filled with watchful eyes and sensitive ears, you and your husband have just shared an intimate moment. Not a single family member stirred. No one suspects a thing. Not even a whisper of scandal will reach the village gossips tomorrow. How? How did medieval couples achieve the impossible, finding physical intimacy while living in the same room as their entire extended family without anyone ever discovering their secret encounters? The answer lies in an intricate web of techniques, so sophisticated, so carefully refined through generations of necessity that they make modern privacy look crude by comparison. These weren't just stolen moments of passion, they were masterfully orchestrated performances of deception, requiring skills that would make a stage magician envious. Today we're going to unlock the secrets that medieval couples guarded with their lives, the coded languages they spoke in plain sight, the architectural modifications they made to their homes, the precise timing they mastered, and the underground networks that protected their most intimate secrets. These techniques were so effective that historians have only recently begun to piece together how they worked. But before we dive into these forbidden strategies, let me tell you about the most crucial element that made all of this possible. A form of communication so subtle that it operated right under the noses of sleeping relatives. Margaret de Clare knew the exact moment her husband desired her. Not from any obvious gesture or whispered word, but from the way he adjusted his eating knife beside his bread bowl during supper. The blade pointed toward the door, their private signal meaning, tonight, after the second bell. Medieval couples didn't just develop a few hand signals. They created entire languages of desire that operated in plain sight of their families, completely undetectable to anyone who didn't know the code. These communication systems were born from desperate necessity. In a world where privacy didn't exist, couples had to find ways to coordinate their intimate moments without raising suspicion. The risk of discovery wasn't just embarrassment, it could lead to social ostracism, family conflict, or worse. The most sophisticated couples developed what historians now call layered signaling, multiple levels of communication that built upon each other throughout the day. A wife might begin by placing her husband's cup slightly to the left of his plate during breakfast, indicating interest. He would respond by helping her with a task that required close proximity, their hands brushing as he passed her a wooden spoon. These seemingly innocent interactions were actually complex negotiations about timing, location, and intensity. The positioning of everyday objects became a secret alphabet. A particular way of folding cloth, the placement of a candle, even the direction a wooden bowl faced, all carried meaning. One 14th century letter discovered in a monastery archive describes how a merchant's wife could communicate her monthly cycle to her husband through the arrangement of herbs hanging from their rafters. But the most ingenious element was the development of false signals, decoy communications designed to throw off suspicious family members. A couple might engage in an elaborate pantomime of disagreement, complete with huffed sighs and deliberate distance, while actually confirming their secret rendezvous for later that night. The training for these communication systems began in childhood. Mothers taught daughters the subtle arts of meaningful glances and strategic positioning. Fathers showed sons how to read the almost imperceptible language of feminine gestures. By the time they married, couples already possessed a sophisticated vocabulary of silent communication. Yet even the most perfect communication system meant nothing without the ability to create actual physical privacy in a one-room dwelling. Medieval couples solved this problem through modifications to their living spaces that were nothing short of architectural genius. The heavy wool curtains that surrounded medieval beds weren't just for warmth. They were elaborate privacy machines, engineered over centuries to provide complete concealment for intimate activities. But it wasn't just the curtains themselves that made the magic possible. It was the entire system of modifications that couples made to their sleeping areas, often without their families ever realizing what was happening. The most crucial element was sound dampening. Medieval couples discovered that certain materials could absorb and muffle the sounds of intimate activity. They would gradually, over months or years, add layers of fabric to their bed curtains, claiming they needed extra warmth. Beneath their mattresses, they placed carefully arranged bundles of straw and cloth that eliminated the telltale creaking of bed frames. The positioning of the bed itself became a science. The most skilled couples maneuvered their sleeping area to what they called the dead sound zone, a spot in the room where the acoustics naturally muffled noise. This usually meant positioning the bed so that the heaviest wall was behind them, with the headboard placed to deflect sound away from sleeping family members. But the real genius lay in the creation of false floors beneath their beds. Using whatever materials they could gather without suspicion, extra straw, discarded cloth, even carefully placed stones, couples created a secondary surface that eliminated the sound of shifting weight. The construction of these hidden cushioning systems was done gradually over weeks or months, with materials added so slowly that no one noticed the bed growing slightly higher. The most sophisticated couples even modified their bed frames themselves. Men would carefully wrap rope joints with scraps of wool or wedge small pieces of wood into potential squeaking points. Women became experts at identifying and treating every possible source of noise, from loose floorboards to creaking wall joints. Lighting presented its own challenges. Too much light would expose their activities, but too little would make movement dangerous. Couples developed techniques for manipulating the dying embers of the hearth, using small pieces of wood or strategic positioning of existing logs to create just enough illumination for safety without bright flashes that might wake sleeping relatives. The creation of visual barriers was equally important. Beyond the bed curtains, couples would arrange their few possessions. Wooden chests, hanging clothes, even carefully positioned baskets to create additional layers of concealment. These arrangements had to appear natural and practical, while actually serving as elaborate screening systems. Some couples even developed emergency systems, predetermined arrangements of objects that could be quickly adjusted if someone began to stir. A wooden bowl that could be silently moved to create a sound barrier, or a hanging cloth that could be repositioned to block a sight line. But even the most perfect architectural concealment was useless without mastering the most crucial element of all, the precise timing that could make the difference between successful intimacy and family scandal. Thomas the miller knew that his wife's breathing shifted to a deeper rhythm exactly 17 minutes after she closed her eyes. His mother's snoring began 23 minutes after she settled into her bed. His young son's restless movement stopped after the boy had been still for 30 minutes. After years of careful observation, Thomas had mapped his family's sleep patterns with the precision of a natural philosopher. This wasn't unusual. Medieval couples became experts in what we might now call sleep science, developing an understanding of human rest patterns that wouldn't be matched by actual scientists for another 6 centuries. The key was understanding that sleep happens in stages, and each family member had their own unique progression. The most skilled couples could predict almost to the minute when each person in their household would reach deep sleep, the only time when intimate activity was truly safe. But timing wasn't just about waiting for sleep. It was about choreographing the entire evening to create the perfect window of opportunity. This began hours before bedtime, with subtle manipulations of family routines that would ensure everyone would be maximally tired at the crucial moment. A wife might suggest slightly more physical work during the day, or ensure that the evening meal was particularly satisfying. A husband might engage his teenage brother in extra conversation, keeping him awake just long enough to ensure he would fall into deep sleep quickly. Children might be encouraged to play more vigorously, burning energy that would guarantee sound sleep later. The most sophisticated couples developed what historians call sleep induction techniques, methods for encouraging deeper sleep in family members without raising suspicion. This included everything from strategic use of chamomile tea to carefully timed bedtime stories that would relax children into deeper slumber. The monitoring of sleep depth required extraordinary sensitivity. Couples learned to distinguish between the different types of breathing that indicated light sleep versus deep sleep. They could identify the subtle changes in body position that meant someone was beginning to wake, or the almost imperceptible shifts in snoring patterns that indicated a family member was moving between sleep stages. But perhaps the most crucial skill was learning to abort their intimate activities instantly and silently if someone began to stir. This required split-second decision-making and the ability to return to completely natural positions without making a sound. Some couples practiced these emergency procedures during daylight hours, perfecting their ability to freeze or separate instantly. The timing of the activity itself became a carefully calibrated performance. Every movement, every breath, every subtle shift was planned and rehearsed. The most experienced couples could complete their intimate moments in the narrow window between one family member's deep sleep cycle and another's restless period. Weather played a crucial role in these timing calculations. Storms provided natural sound cover but also made family members more wakeful. Cold nights meant everyone slept more deeply but also required more careful attention to staying warm. Summer's longer days compressed the window of darkness, while winter's extended nights provided more opportunities but also more risks. Yet even perfect timing and architectural concealment couldn't protect couples from the greatest threat to their secret intimacy: the sharp eyes and knowing wisdom of the women in their community who had developed their own underground network of protection and information. When Eleanor of Westford was preparing for marriage in 1348, her mother pulled her aside for a conversation that would never be recorded in any church document or official record. In whispered tones, surrounded by the other women of the household, Eleanor learned secrets that had been passed down through generations of mothers and daughters, knowledge that could mean the difference between successful intimacy and devastating exposure. This wasn't just advice about wifely duties, this was intelligence gathering and counterintelligence that would make a modern spy network envious. The women's network operated on multiple levels simultaneously. New brides were inducted into a sophisticated system of mutual protection that included lookouts, alibis, and emergency procedures. Older women served as advisors, sharing techniques refined through decades of experience. Middle-aged women became the intelligence gatherers, monitoring family sleep patterns and identifying optimal timing windows. The most crucial element was the creation of plausible explanations for every possible suspicious circumstance. If a mother-in-law heard unusual sounds from the marriage bed, there was always a predetermined cover story ready. The wife might have been suffering from monthly cramps that required her husband's comfort. Strange movements could be explained as checking on a sick child. Unusual breathing patterns were nightmares that required spousal soothing. But the women's network went far beyond simple cover stories. They developed an entire system of early warning signals that operated throughout the household. An older woman might cough in a specific pattern to indicate that someone was beginning to stir. A daughter-in-law might shift her own position to create a strategic sound barrier. Even young children were unconsciously trained to provide distractions at crucial moments. The sharing of practical knowledge was equally sophisticated. Women passed along information about which herbs could encourage deeper sleep in family members, which foods would make people more or less likely to wake during the night, and which household tasks could be used to subtly exhaust potential witnesses. This knowledge was considered so valuable that it was often part of a bride's unofficial dowry. The network also provided emotional support that was crucial for maintaining these deceptions over years or decades. The constant stress of concealment, the fear of discovery, and the guilt associated with deception could destroy even the strongest marriages. The women's network offered counseling, encouragement, and the crucial reassurance that these activities were normal and necessary Perhaps most importantly, the network provided protection against the most dangerous threat: gossip. Women who were part of the system became expert at deflecting suspicion, redirecting conversations, and creating alternative explanations for any unusual behavior. They could identify potential troublemakers in the community and take preemptive action to prevent scandal. The network also maintained what we might now call quality control. Women who were skilled in the arts of concealment would quietly assess new brides and provide additional training if necessary. Those who proved unable to maintain secrecy might be gradually excluded from the most sensitive information, protecting the entire system from exposure. But even the most sophisticated network of female allies couldn't overcome the fundamental challenge of seasonal variation. Medieval couples discovered that their success depended heavily on understanding and exploiting the natural rhythms of the agricultural year. Spring was the season of secret rendezvous, and experienced couples spent the entire winter planning for the opportunities that warmer weather would bring. The key was understanding that each season brought its own unique combination of opportunities and risks. Spring offered the first chance for outdoor privacy in months, but it also brought increased activity as families emerged from winter confinement. Summer provided extended daylight for fieldwork that could serve as cover for intimate encounters, but it also meant more visitors and seasonal workers crowding into already cramped living spaces. The most sophisticated couples developed what historians call seasonal rotation strategies, different approaches to intimacy that took advantage of the unique characteristics of each time of year. Winter intimacy required the most skill because it had to happen entirely within the confines of the family dwelling, but experienced couples discovered that the cold actually provided advantages. The necessity of sharing body heat gave couples a legitimate reason to sleep closely together. The sound of wind and storms provided natural cover for quiet movements. Most importantly, the long nights meant that the period of deep family sleep was extended, providing larger windows of opportunity. Spring brought the first opportunities for outdoor encounters in months. The key was identifying locations that were both private and provided legitimate reasons for couples to be there together. Checking on emerging crops, gathering early herbs, or inspecting winter damage to fences and buildings all provided cover for brief, intimate encounters. The most skilled couples would spend winter months scouting and preparing these locations, ensuring they would be ready when warmer weather arrived. Summer required different strategies entirely. The extended daylight hours meant that true darkness came later and lasted for shorter periods. But summer also brought the opportunity for what couples called midday intimacy, brief encounters during the hottest part of the day when other family members sought shade and rest. The key was identifying the precise timing when the combination of heat and post-meal drowsiness created windows of opportunity. The harvest season presented unique challenges and opportunities. The intense physical labor meant that everyone was exhausted, creating deeper sleep patterns. But harvest also brought additional workers and visitors, crowding living spaces even further. Successful couples learned to exploit the chaos of harvest time, using the activity and noise as cover for intimate moments. But perhaps the most crucial seasonal strategy was the use of religious festivals and celebrations. These events provided rare opportunities for couples to express affection more openly, under the cover of community celebration. The key was understanding which festivals provided the best opportunities and how to take advantage of them without raising suspicion. The most skilled couples also learned to use seasonal foods and beverages to their advantage. Certain herbs and plants that grew at specific times of year could be used to encourage deeper sleep in family members. Seasonal alcoholic beverages consumed during festivals and celebrations could create opportunities for more relaxed behavior. Weather patterns became crucial intelligence. Couples learned to read the signs that indicated storms approaching, providing natural sound cover. They could predict when fog would provide visual concealment for outdoor encounters. Even the phases of the moon became part of their strategic planning. But all of these seasonal strategies, all of the sophisticated communication systems, all of the architectural modifications and timing techniques were ultimately built around one fundamental principle that made medieval intimacy possible, a truth so profound that it has been almost completely forgotten in our modern world. The ultimate secret of medieval intimacy wasn't about the elaborate codes, the architectural modifications, or even the perfect timing. It was about something far more profound, something that modern couples, despite all their privacy and luxury, have almost entirely lost. The greatest deception medieval couples perpetrated wasn't on their families, it was on history itself. For centuries, historians believed that medieval couples simply endured loveless, practical marriages with minimal physical connection. The evidence seemed overwhelming. The constant presence of family members, the religious restrictions, the lack of privacy, the harsh living conditions. How could real intimacy exist under such circumstances? But the historical record was wrong, not because the facts were incorrect, but because medieval couples were so extraordinarily skilled at concealment that they successfully hid their intimate lives, not just from their families, but from posterity itself. The truth is that medieval couples didn't just find ways to have physical intimacy despite the lack of privacy. They developed forms of intimacy that were actually deeper, more meaningful, and more sustainable than what most modern couples experience. The secret lay in what they called invisible intimacy, connection that was so subtle, so integrated into daily life that it was undetectable to observers but constantly present for the couple themselves. This began with the understanding that true intimacy isn't primarily about physical privacy or sexual activity. It's about the continuous, moment-by-moment choice to remain connected to your partner even when surrounded by others. Medieval couples mastered this art because they had to. Every shared glance across a crowded room became charged with meaning. Every brief touch while passing objects became an affirmation of connection. Every whispered conversation during daily tasks became an opportunity for emotional intimacy. The very constraints that seemed to make intimacy impossible actually forced couples to discover intimacy in places modern couples never think to look. The most profound revelation was that the presence of family members, rather than preventing intimacy, actually intensified it. When every moment together was precious because it was threatened, when every touch was meaningful because it was rare, when every private word was treasured because it was whispered, couples developed an appreciation for connection that transcended physical circumstances. Medieval couples discovered that intimacy isn't something you find in private moments. It's something you create in public spaces. It's not about being alone together. It's about being together even when you're not alone. They understood that the most powerful intimacy happens not in the bedroom, but in the kitchen while preparing meals together. Not in private conversations, but in the shared glances that need no words. Not in grand gestures of romance, but in the thousand small choices to remain connected throughout the ordinary moments of daily life. This is why their techniques for concealment were so sophisticated, because they weren't just hiding physical activity. They were protecting something far more precious, a form of connection that was so complete, so integrated into every aspect of their shared existence that it couldn't be destroyed by external circumstances. The ultimate secret that medieval couples discovered, the one that enabled all their other techniques, was this. True intimacy isn't about finding privacy from the world. It's about creating a private world that exists wherever you and your partner are together. In that cramped stone cottage in 1352, surrounded by sleeping relatives and flickering shadows, you and your husband didn't just steal a moment of physical intimacy. You participated in a form of connection that was so profound, so carefully cultivated, and so skillfully protected that it has taken historians 7 centuries to understand what you achieved. You proved that love doesn't require solitude. It creates solitude even in a room full of people. 2 hearts that have learned to beat in synchronization can find a privacy that no amount of physical space can provide. That is, the secret medieval couples never revealed, the technique they never taught, the wisdom they never wrote down, because it wasn't a technique at all. It was a way of being that transformed every constraint into an opportunity, every obstacle into an invitation, every limitation into a deeper reason to choose each other. Modern couples, for all their privacy and freedom, are still learning what medieval couples knew instinctively, that the most profound intimacy happens not when you're alone together, but when you're together, even when you're not alone, when you're not alone, when you're not